Ecuador's Union for Hope presidential candidate Andrés Arauz reached a preliminary agreement with Russia for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines. Spain's Supreme Court has upheld the sentence to 133 years in prison imposed on former Colonel Inocente Montano for the murder of 5 Spanish Jesuit priests during El Salvador Civil War. And the 5-year extension of the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty between Russia and the U.S. START 3 enters into force this Wednesday. Hello and welcome to teleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is From the South. In Ecuador, Union for Hope presidential candidate Andrés Arauz reached a preliminary agreement with Russia for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines. The leader of the Union for Hope coalition said via his Twitter account that the agreement with Russia establishes the purchase of an important amount of Sputnik V vaccines. Arauz also detailed the upcoming vaccination timetable. The presidential candidate pointed out that this agreement is in addition to the commitment made with Argentina, which would also provide Ecuador with the vaccine. President Alberto Fernandez sent a letter to the presidential candidate committing his country to provide Ecuador with 4.4 million vaccines against COVID-19. The candidates for the presidency and the vice presidency of Ecuador are undertaking their penultimate day of campaigning for the general elections to be held on February 7th. The final campaign activities include virtual forums and interviews due to the restrictions imposed by COVID-19. This Wednesday and Thursday, candidates are expected to hold meetings with the electorate to outline their government programs. The candidates for vice president and president for the Union for Hope coalition, Carlos Rabascal and Andrés Arauz, will close their campaign in the province of Manabí. Meanwhile, Guillermo Lasso, presidential candidate for the I Believe movement, announced the closing of his campaign in the capital Quito with a caravan for life. The electoral campaign will officially close on Thursday from 12 p.m. local time, which will give way to the electoral silence period. A leading member of the National Electoral Council of Ecuador has requested that the status of 2 international observers to Sunday's elections be revoked. The request regarding European Parliament member Manuel Pineda and politologist Juan Carlos Monedero was made by the Vice President of the National Electoral Council, Enrique Pita, to the President of the Electoral Authority. The official alleged that the 2 international observers had expressed comments in favor of the presidential candidate for the Union for Hope coalition, Andrés Arauz. The move comes just a few hours before the end of the electoral campaign for the general elections to be held this Sunday. And in an interview with teleSUR, European Parliament member Manuel Pineda denied his support for Ecuadorian presidential candidate Andrés Arauz. He also noted that he has not yet received a formal notification of the request to withdraw his international certification.
I have not even been formally informed of Vice President Pita's request that I've been withdrawn. I learned of this request through a journalist, and the truth is that it has been a surprise to me. I have not campaigned for any candidate. I am here as an international observer, and my objective to verify how clean and transparent is the process. And I expressed my concern about a possibility that seemed very likely that the electoral process would be suspended and delayed until a later date.
The MEP further added that the authorities of the Electoral Council have not yielded to pressure from certain political sectors that are promoting the suspension of the general elections scheduled for February 7th.
Fortunately, the majority of the National Electoral Commission are holding their own and resisting the pressures that are obviously being exerted. And I have to say that the position of Vice President Pita is not new. Already, on my last visit here, in which I met with 4 of the 5 CNN councillors, he was one of those with whom I had the opportunity to meet, and at the end of our meeting, he made some comments that I considered very unfortunate. He said that I appeared to be unaware that Ecuador was no longer a Spanish colony and that he didn't know why I had come here, both at that time and now. I am here to try to do my bit so that the process is clean and all citizens have the option to choose.
Moving on, the Venezuelan Parliament's Commission for Dialogue, Peace and Reconciliation is advancing in discussions with various social sectors of the country. National Assembly President Jorge Rodriguez highlighted the meeting held with representatives of the evangelical Christian congregations from all over the country. Rodriguez indicated that as a result of the discussions with the sector, a special subcommission will be formed to make the agreements reached effective. The official also pointed out that one of the most important aspects of the dialogue process is to hold meetings with organic proposals.
It shouldn't be this meeting alone. That shouldn't be the only news that appears in the media. No, it must be an organic meeting in order to take some early conclusions from this meeting with the evangelical congregation. A subcommission will be formed because we also have evangelical pastors who are members of the new National Assembly.
Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza met with the Foreign Policy Committee of the National Assembly to evaluate the impact of the coercive measures imposed on the country by the U.S. In statements to the press, the diplomat offered details of the meeting. Let's have a look.
In these circumstances, we have analyzed the sanctions on the basis of which norms they follow or are supported by, in this case, United States or Canadian or Europeans, and which are illegal in the international arena, in terms of their extraterritorial application, in how the financial system has lent itself to the over-compliance with these unilateral coercive measures, and of course all the aggressions ranging from a sanction against a lawmaker for having been elected to a threat of a military operation against Venezuela issued by the commander-in-chief of the most powerful army in the world until recently, that is Donald Trump.
Mexico, Colombia, and Brazil have reported an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in the last week, according to the Pan American Health Organization.
While in Mexico, cases and deaths continue to increase, particularly in the states that attracted significant tourism during the holiday season, like Guerrero, Quintana Roo, Nayarit, and Baja California del Sur. Colombia continues to report the highest incidence in cases, followed by Brazil, which is still seeing exponential increases in both cases and deaths in the city of Manaus.
In Spain, the Supreme Court has upheld the sentence to 133 years in prison imposed on former Colonel Inocente Montano for the murder of 5 Spanish Jesuit priests during the Civil War in El Salvador. The criminal chamber of the Supreme Court upheld the sentence handed down last September by the National Court after dismissing the appeal filed by the defense of the former colonel. The National Court tried the former military officer between June and July 2020 in Madrid and considered him the author of 5 crimes of murder of a terrorist nature which occurred in 1989. Montano was Deputy Minister of Public Security of El Salvador at the time of the massacre. Staying in Spain, thousands of people cited as polling stations officials for the elections in Catalonia are refusing due to the risk of COVID-19 infection. According to data released by the Superior Court of Justice of Catalonia, over 9,000 people called to participate in the electoral process represented appeals related to the risk of contagion, which represents close to 10% of those cited. In the city of Barcelona alone, more than 3,000 appeals have been received. The president of the Electoral Board of Barcelona assured local media that these numbers had never exceeded 1,000 before and stressed that it is clear that people are afraid of the pandemic. The authorities plan to sign up volunteers to make up for the absences during the vote. The community of Latin America and Caribbean states showed concern regarding the European Union's restrictions to the shipment of COVID-19 vaccines to countries outside the EU. The 32 nations that make up the CELAC called on the international community to avoid imposing measures that would prevent a global response to the pandemic, but rather to address the emergency based on unity, solidarity, political agreement, and multilateral cooperation. In this regard, CELAC urges the international community to work together to strengthen supply chains that promote and guarantee universal, fair, efficient, and timely access to medicines, vaccines, and supplies needed to deal with COVID-19. On Wednesday, several thousand Croatian restaurants, bars, and businesses owners rallied in Zagreb against the government coronavirus restrictions, which forced them to close. The protest in the capital was organized by an association of entrepreneurs who are demanding they be allowed to work while respecting antivirus measures. Business owners say their income has been devastated since they were ordered to shut down late last year during a surge in COVID-19 cases in the country. Croatia recorded 730 new infections on Wednesday, bringing the total to more than 230,000, while over 5,000 COVID-19 deaths have been reported. Government officials stress that antivirus measures must stay in place, although daily case numbers are down from a peak in late November.
Civil rights guaranteed by the Constitution, and nobody can take them from us. If the government is not able to secure them, let someone else do it. I am a coach for juniors in a basketball club in Šibenik, and because of measures and because of alleged grave threat from COVID-19, or let's say coronavirus, it is forbidden for children to practice sports. More than 90% of girls from my club can practice, and automatically they don't pay fees, and automatically I am left without income.
Moving on, the Czech Republic reached 1 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 on Wednesday. The number of cases reported by Ministry of Health on Wednesday morning, which reflect the total tabulated through Tuesday, stands at 1,003,000. During the pandemic, the country has faced a healthcare system near collapse in some regions. Also, in January, the country's largest crematorium in the northeastern city of Ostrava was overrun with demand due to the disease. The Czech Republic was spared the worst of the pandemic in the spring, only to see its healthcare system overwhelmed in the fall when another spike began. China on Wednesday announced a plan to provide 10 million coronavirus vaccine doses to developing nations through the global COVAX initiative. Let's have a look.
In close communication with the World Health Organization and other sponsors to work together to make the vaccine a global public good and ensure its accessibility and affordability for developing countries. We attach great importance to the call by the WHO Director General Tedros to vaccinate priority populations in all countries within the first 100 days of the year, as well as to the difficulties facing the implementation process, especially the huge shortage of vaccine supply in February and March. At the request of the WHO, China decided to provide 10 million doses of vaccines to the COVAX, mainly for the urgent needs of developing countries. This is another important step taken by China to promote the fair distribution of vaccines, promote international cooperation in the fight against the pandemic, and to practice the concept of community of shared health of mankind. The WHO has started to review the authorization for the emergency use of Chinese vaccines, and Chinese enterprises will continue to actively cooperate in the hopes that the WHO will complete this work as soon as possible.
Namibia has extended the current COVID-19 containment measures for another 21 days with minor adjustments. President Hage announced that the hours the current curfew applies would be adjusted.
As you may be aware, the current regulations will expire at 23 hours 59 tonight, 3rd of February 2021. The status quo will be maintained and extended for a period of 21 days, from 4th of February to 24th of February 2021. With regard to the restrictions of movement, curfew hours will be adjusted to begin at 2020 hours and end at 05 hours daily.
On Wednesday, Joe Biden's administration announced that the United States is extending the New START nuclear arms treaty with Russia for 5 years. The announcement comes amid growing tensions with the Kremlin. Russian President Vladimir Putin signed the extension on Friday, which means that the treaty first agreed under the Obama administration in 2010 will remain in force until February 5th, 2026. Russia's foreign ministry welcomed the extension, stating that it ensures the preservation of a key mechanism for maintaining strategic stability. NATO also welcomed the announcement and expressed its support because it believes the pact contributes to international stability. The START treaty limits the number of nuclear warheads that can be deployed by the U.S. and Russia to 30% less than the limit set in 2002. Former European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi agreed on Wednesday to try to form a new government to see Italy through the devastating coronavirus pandemic after the previous coalition collapsed. Draghi's appointment was made by Italian President Sergio Mattarella to form the government after the failure of negotiations between the coalition parties led by Giuseppe Conte. In his speech, Mattarella called on all political forces in the country to support an institutional government not identified with any political party and with a high profile to face the political, social, and health crisis facing the country in the midst of the pandemic. After meeting with the president, Mario Draghi called for unity in that European nation. This Wednesday, Israel demolished the Bedouin village in the occupied West Bank for the second time in 3 months. Israeli authorities justified its illegal action, saying the village of Kirbi had been constructed illegally on a military firing range. Kirbet Humsu's inhabitants said they feared Israeli settlers would seize the vacated land if they leave. The Israeli rights groups B'Tselem said the demolition at Kirbet Humsu was unusually broad, accusing Israel of seeking to forcibly transfer Palestinians' communities in order to take over their land. The rights groups added that the dismantled tent had housed 74 Palestinians, including 41 minors.
The expulsion of Palestinian families means an end to the Palestinian presence in the Jordan Valley. The goal of the occupation is not just Humsa, but the goal is the Jordan Valley. If the occupation applies these decisions and this crime it is carrying out today, it is carrying out the death sentence on all Palestinian communities located in the Jordan Valley.
Residents in Myanmar's largest city, Yangon, held a noisy protest for a second night on Wednesday in opposition to Monday's military takeover. Banging pots and pans and clapping loudly, residents made noise as they stood on balconies of downtown apartment blocks or in the street, with passing cars blaring horns. The military said the takeover of power was necessary because the government had not acted on the claims of fraud in November's election.
The military takeover is an insult. People were living peacefully and things were stable, and they have destroyed everything. They have insulted the people. So, as a citizen, I have decided to fight against this military junta until it ends.
The Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO is holding a high-level virtual event to launch the Ocean Decade, as well as to highlight the upcoming challenges and opportunities. The world relies on the ocean for more than 50% of its oxygen, yet the next 10 years could be critical for the ocean. In this regard, the United Nations has launched the Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, a major global initiative to deepen our scientific knowledge of the sea. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres opened the high-level event. Global leaders, UN agencies, and marine scientists are attending and speaking at the event. UNESCO aims to make ocean science more mainstream and also educate people on the importance of the ocean in our daily lives.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown the fragility and vulnerability of our societies. To recover stronger and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we must stop degrading the environment we depend on. The ocean faces unprecedented threats due to human activity. By 2050, there may be more plastic than fish in the sea, and all the world's tropical coral reefs could be dead by the end of the century if we don't act now. Protecting and sustainably managing the ocean is essential for food, livelihoods, and mitigating climate disruption and related disasters. More than 80% of our ocean is unmapped and unexplored. Yet, ocean science accounts for a minuscule amount of funding. To restore the marine environment, we need knowledge, an ocean science revolution. Today, we launched the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development.
And with that story, we've come to the end of today's news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, don't forget to follow us on our social media account. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.